Welcome to Section 5. This is Approaches and Techniques. Here's the table of contents. This is what we'll be covering in this section. We'll talk about personal preference and how our feelings relate to colors. And we'll also talk about a phrase, "You are not your audience." This is what myself and other designers often say. We'll talk about that. There is also a rule called the 60-30-10 rule. We'll discover what that is, and we'll apply it to some of our projects. I'll also talk about mood boards and really some more aspects of what we can do as we are out and about in the world and we are collecting colors as we are mobile. Lastly, we'll talk about human emotion and how human beings react to color in different ways. Personal preference. We as humans have various biases and feelings and opinions. It might come from past experience. It might come from the culture that we have been raised in. It also might depend on our mood, how we feel that particular day. It's really also situational, where we are at the time or when we see a particular color in a particular context. For example, red in some situations might mean Kentucky Fried Chicken because it's got a red brand and maybe you're hungry. But other times, if we see red, it might symbolize something bad, such as blood, or maybe a stock market number is going down. It's in the red. So there are various situations that we will be in where color will have a different meaning to us. Also, I wanted to note, this is all in flux. Some cultural views on certain colors will change over time. You are not your audience. So, as a UX designer, I've often said this phrase because we have to realize we are not building a design or building a product or creating something for ourselves necessarily. Perhaps if we create pure art, it is for ourselves, but oftentimes we are creating something that needs to be viewed or consumed or watched in some way by an audience. You need to create work that works for that audience. So think about who your user is. We use this phrase in user experience. There is a human being on the other end of your creation, right? So it will be consumed by somebody. They will use it. They might use it for entertainment. They might use it as a piece of a product. They might use it to gather information or to get information. Think about who the user is, who the person is that will be consuming what you create. And what are you trying to achieve? What is your goal? We say that we are not our user because we don't want your personal preference to get in the way of what you are trying to achieve. A certain color might be the best color for a particular project, but you personally don't like that color. You might still want to use it if you think the project will be more successful. Don't be tempted by your favorites. However, we, as creative people, we sometimes want to use particular colors. So do it as long as it doesn't affect your project negatively. So here's the 60-30-10 rule. You may have seen this. This comes from interior design or decorating. You might see this in home design magazines. So let's talk about what this rule is and think about it. It might work for certain projects that you're working on. It's really a tip about how to create a palette. So we think about this as we look at the interior design of a room, or we look at a picture that we are drawing or illustrating, creating, or we might look at the user interface of a website we are designing. And we want to pick a main color, like we've been talking about. What is the main color So often it should be a fairly neutral color as your 60%. So 60% of the color should be that neutral main color. So as you see this strip of color here on the left, that neutral color, that's 60%. Now that blue in the middle is a complementary color. We can use that up to 30% of the time. And then the last little bit on the right, the accent color, that's the 10%. Now you might use some other colors, but in general, overall, this is the feeling you get from these colors. If you think about interior design, you look at a room, you look at this room behind me, there's tons of colors here, but you can look at some of the main colors. And if this room was designed well, then it would perhaps follow the 60-30-10 rule. So apply this to some of the work you're doing. There'll be an exercise later that we can experiment with this. And again, I will say, don't let the rules constrain you. Let the rules guide you. It's not an absolute rule. Remember that rules are not the boss of you. Okay, let's talk about mood boards. And really, when we're out and about in the world, we might want to collect images. We have phones, usually. We can take photos. We can rip pages out of magazines. We can sometimes get a swatch of color. We can sometimes get a small object, like a marble or a piece of fruit that has a particular color that we like. Take a picture of it. So that's what a mood board is. You can see one version behind me there. I'm going to show you some more examples. But the mood board is trying to come up with an overall mood for our project. And we take these things we've collected, some photos, an object. Now we can create these mood boards online, or we can do them in an analog way with paper. So find your color as you're out and about. Again, take photos, collect objects, little strips of paper. And once you've snapped these photos, you can use various apps. I'm going to list some for you right now. Also in the resources section, there's even more. But what do we do with all these pieces? Again, you can paste them onto a board. I often do that. But there are a lot of tools that you can use on your computer to allow you to do this. So some of these might just be some of the software that we've talked about before, PowerPoint or Figma. Figma is great for this. Canva, C-A-N-V-A, that's a tool, a design tool that I've mentioned earlier that could work for this. PowerPoint or Keynote. There's some online whiteboard tools. One is called Miro, M-I-R-O, and another is called Mural, M-U-R-A-L. There's also Milanote, which is the note-taking for creative people, and Moodzer. Moodzer is another one that allows you to make collages. So find the tool that works for you, and I suggest you try a bunch of different ones. See what works best for you. But really, this is a place you can make a collage. And once that collage is created, it's an image that gives you a mood or a feeling, and it gets you ready to design your main project. So these types of mood boards are created when you're in the initial stages of a project, when you're in the discovery phase. You're really just trying to get ideas rather than just sitting down and brainstorming, trying to come up with ideas out of your head. Start collecting colors and see how they make you feel. So once you compile these mood boards, they may look something like this. So you can see some of these have objects in them. Sometimes you set up a whole diorama, collect flowers or swatches of color. You can go to Home Depot and take some swatches in the paint section. You can include user interface pieces. So a whole bunch here. But each of these gives a particular feel or a mood, and it gets you ready to design. Colors and human emotions. Let's think about this. So I'm going to share a bunch of colors and images and logos with you of various colors. And we're going to talk about the associations. This is not hard science. Some of this comes from pure science, but a lot of it is various associations or cultural feelings about particular colors. What I'm trying to show here is that certain colors will create certain feelings or moods in human beings. And also, when we are branding something, whether we are branding ourselves or branding a client, or even if we're just doing a fun creative project and we want it to have a feel, it has a brand to it. So let's dive through the different colors and see what associations we get. So there are positive and negative aspects to the various colors. Red, as we might see in Target or Coca-Cola or Supreme, there's a feeling of power. Sometimes red is associated with power. Sometimes passion, like Valentine's Day or a red heart. It's certainly a color that generates some energy or stimulation. And it does have some negative aspects. Of course, I think every color probably does. It could be a danger or a warning, red flashing lights. It could also mean stop or not symbol, the circle with a line through it, or a stop sign, or do not enter, sometimes associated with this color. Some interesting aspects of color. I always heard that bulls or cattle, when they are in a bullfighting ring and the bullfighter has a red cape, that the bulls get really mad at the red cape, but turns out cattle and bulls can't see the color red. So they're just mad in general that they're in this situation. It's not the red color. There's also, I mentioned earlier how colors change over time culturally. It used to be in the United States that pink was associated with boys, red being a very manly color. So pink was kind of the watered down version of red. So it was associated with boys. So often you saw toys for boys in pink, and often the blue would be associated with the girls. Over time, that changed. Amazing. So let's talk about orange. This is high energy, very enthusiastic. We see brands like the Home Depot or SoundCloud or the Dunkin' in Dunkin' Donuts. Sometimes this color could be associated as silly or superficial, but usually it's friendly, it's inviting, casual. It's sometimes a confident color and certainly playful. In many ways, it is associated with fun. And it's also very vibrant, especially the pure saturated version, super vibrant. Sometimes can be considered silly, so playful can be fun and playful, but it can also go to the other end of the spectrum, which is silly. Yellow. Okay, yellow. We see that in McDonald's, Snapchat, IKEA. Often this is associated with positivity. It's a thumbs up. It's optimistic. Sunshine is yellow. It's often associated with happiness. And it's considered a creative color. It has a lot of energy to it. Sometimes it can have a little too much energy. Sometimes it can hurt the eyes if you have too much of it. That can cause you to be a little anxious, jittery. Also, one of the negative aspects is cowardice, or you're yellow, you're scared, you're a fraidy cat. Yellow is sometimes considered an all ages color. It can be associated with any age group. Green. So we see this in the Starbucks logo, Spotify, John Deere. There's a whole ton of different logos that are green. It's really the color of nature and trees and plants. It can also be associated with wealth and money. Here in the US, greenbacks, dollar bills. It's considered a wealth color. It's also considered a go color on green lights. Green means go. It's also associated oftentimes with health because it's natural, it's plant oriented. And in countries other than the US, they have a green cross, kind of like a red cross to symbolize a pharmacy. A green cross in many countries means a pharmacy or some kind of health related organization. We can be green with envy. So we sometimes get green in different ways. It can be materialism, greedy, and also it can symbolize mold or rot or like the the color of a zombie or the color of an algae colored pool. So again, colors can be associated with different moods depending on your situation. Blue. Blue is often referred to as the world's favorite color. Often when they do research and they ask people what their favorite color is, it's often blue. So we see Facebook, BMW, Ford, very solid brands that use the blue. Blue is often associated with dependability. It's got a lot of good associations, loyalty as well. Can be calm and cool. Cool colors are said to lower your blood pressure. Sometimes. Blue is considered a trustworthy color as well. Sometimes it's considered a little corporate, maybe a little too corporate for some people's tastes. Sadness. We're feeling blue. So there are some negative associations with blue. It can be associated with anxiety or emotional fragility. It can also be associated with cold, like you're turning blue because you're freezing. So it's another negative association. Purple. So we see this in brands like Hallmark, Twitch, Cadbury. There's a variety of others. It can be very creative. It can also be associated with royalty. Spirituality also comes up. Nobility, royalty, power, ambition. These are associations. Can also be considered luxurious as well. And in some ways, when used in certain ways, it can be immature. It can be considered a kid's color in some ways. Can also be considered extravagant, like too much color. There's also some negative connotations. You'll notice things such as like in Disney movies, the villains are often purple. Maleficent, Ursula, I think there's a few others. So you'll often see some villains associated with purple. Now let's talk about the color white. So it can be very clean, and it can also be neutral, meaning not good or bad. So there's positive and negative associations, also just kind of this neutral or blank or absent. And white can also be modern, very sleek, clean, minimalistic, pure. But there's also that feeling that it's blank, that it's not filled in yet. It's too vanilla. It's stark or isolated. Can also be sometimes considered boring or vanilla. Now, white can be used in a lot of great ways to help your other colors stand out. If you have a white background, it'll help those other colors pop out. And Often, if you're doing design, if you make a logo, for instance, you may need a pure white version of the logo because you might need it to be very small in the bottom corner of some design on top of a bunch of other colors. So you may need to create a white version of it. And sometimes it's considered unimaginative because even though technically, as we learned with RGB, white is the presence of all colors, it's sometimes as if there's no colors at all. Oh, and it can also be considered cold, kind of like blue in some ways, but the white of snow or ice, it can also make design feel cold. Black. So we often consider black as more of a powerful color. It's fully saturated. It's dark. Sometimes it's considered sophisticated or even elegant. Often we'll see black when the designer wants to associate with authority. Very solid. Black is often considered a timeless color, like a color for all eras. It can be mysterious, and that can be both good or bad. You know, we have good associations with black, like being in the black means that with money, you are not in debt, you are profitable, you are solvent, you are in the black. So that's good. But sometimes the color black is considered negative, like in a cowboy movie where the bad guy wears a black hat, or we might use the phrase, he has a black heart. Bad guy. So sometimes black is associated with evil or sadness. Brown. Now, brown is not on the color wheel. I included it here because we use it a lot. It's the color of the earth or tree trunks or wood or chocolate or puppy dogs. So, not on the color wheel, but it is associated with a solid color like the earth, solid earth. And it's secure, very natural. Brown is a composite color, so it's a mix of pigments. It's a blend of primary and secondary colors. It's essentially an orange. It's made by combining red and yellow and black mostly. And sometimes it can feel stark. Sometimes it's considered dirty or yucky or associated with poo. So be careful when you use it. Okay, let's dive into our exercise. This is exercise number 4. Now, let me describe it to you. I want you to do mobile capture on a walk. You may have already done some. I want this to become a practice of yours where everywhere you look, you're starting to think about colors. So do some more mobile capture. Now, create a mood board. You can take a bunch of your photos or things that you collect, and you can categorize them by mood and create a happy mood board, create a sad mood board, and use certain colors and images that you've collected. Now, as you create these mood boards, also explore the 60-30-10 rule. There's a couple of ways to do that. So in this exercise, I'm going to describe a lot of different things that you can do, and I want you to mix and match to see what works best for you. But there's a couple of things you can do to explore the 60-30-10 rule. For instance, one thing you can do is take a photo of some rooms in your house, or maybe you're out at some office or a restaurant, or you're in a park. Take some pictures and bring those back. Analyze those, especially the interiors, and see if you can figure out if the designer of that room or that building followed the 60-30-10 rule. Some of your photos you might see follow the 60-30-10 rule pretty closely. Others, not so much. Take some notes about how it differs or follows the 60-30-10 rule. Another way you can explore the 60-30-10 rule is to collect some pictures and digitally or analog place 6 pictures of a certain color, 3 pictures of another, and then 1 picture of another. That would be 60-30-10. And you can start to mix and match and move these around. I'm going to show you some ways later about how we can extract a palette out of a photograph. So stand by for that. But do understand that most photos have thousands of colors in them. What we're looking for is kind of the primary or the predominant colors. Now, also, once you share all these things, you create your mood boards, share them with family and friends, maybe somebody you know who appreciates color, or even somebody who doesn't quite get it. How did they feel about the mood boards you created? Did you create a sad one and it made somebody happy? Did you create a happy one and it made someone sad? See if other people have the same reactions as you did as you were creating them. And remember to have fun and enjoy this. The more you explore and enjoy it, the more you will learn.